Good evening all and welcome. Tonight we're going to be heading back into the deep woods for a collection of scary stories. So buckle up because it's time to get comfortable. Grab your flashlight and let the darkness take control. This happened about 20 years ago while hunting with my dad in northern British Columbia. It was a cold October morning, and it was still dark when we parked the truck and started our hike into a clear cut. I was familiar with the area as we had moose hunted there before. My dad went left and I went right, and I made my way to the top of a slope to get a better view of the clear cut. I found a stump to sit on and took out my binoculars and quickly found my dad in the clear cut across the mountain. My father is a retired policeman. I won't say for who to protect his identity, but my dad is very tuned in with Mother Earth and her animals, and also he never lies. We left the area as we usually would. As soon as I spotted him, I heard something heavy move behind me in the forest about 40 yards away. Thinking, yes, a moose. I then head towards the forest's edge when I hear a scream, the likes of which I've never heard. It did not sound human, nor like any animal I've ever heard. It was so loud, I swear for a moment my soul left my body, and I turned around and ran down that clearing as fast as my teenage legs would carry me. I was nervous because my dad was taking so long. I would have sped the hell out of there, but he was calm and kind of clearing his throat, which I know for my dad means he's trying to say something hard. When we were about half a kilometer away, he looked at me and asked if I'd seen it. I said no, that I just heard something big but thought it was a moose, and headed towards the woods and heard a shriek. It was honestly bone-chilling. I could have wept myself. Here I was, a 15-year-old girl, alone, and hearing this. Anyway, I asked my dad if he heard it too, and he said he had. I went quiet for a minute. He then said he saw what screamed. He said it was around 7 to 8 feet tall. He knew this because there's a branch stub that sits about 6.5 feet on the tree. Like I said, we've been to this area before, 2 previous falls, and he said it was as tall as a moose and black and brown in color, standing on 2 feet like a human. He then said it had eyes of a human or ape, which really scared me. I could tell he was shaken. When we got back to my auntie's, my dad called an elder over and told him and my aunt what we experienced. The elder said we'd run into the forest or guardian of the land, and there are many stories about it, within and outside of our lands. This is a story my aunt told me years ago. My aunt and her family lived in a very rural and backwoods area of Lincoln County, West Virginia. She said that her father would go fox hunting periodically. He and other men would travel up into the mountains to their camp. They would let their dogs run or chase foxes and spend the evening talking and telling stories amongst themselves. My aunt had many siblings, which was not uncommon back in the 1950s in the backwoods of West Virginia. Her mother decided that she would walk with several of the younger children up to her husband, my aunt's father's camp, and my aunt was one of the party. She said that they had walked a long way back up the mountain and spent a few hours relaxing and spending time with her dad. The group had such a nice time they didn't realize that it had gotten late. My aunt's father had given his wife a lantern in order for her and the kids to be able to see on their long journey down. As the group left, the light from the fox hunters' camp eventually faded out of sight. As they walked on down the mountain, her mother noticed a small ball of light about the size of a softball coming down the mountain behind them. Thinking it was her husband needing something, she and the children stopped on the trail to wait. As they stood there, the light slowly made its way down the path and into better view. My aunt said that the closer it got, they could see that it wasn't a lantern, but a ball of light floating 3 feet off the ground. She said once her mother realized this, she put the children in front of her and told them to run as fast as they could down the trail that was cut into the mountain. My aunt told me that they all ran very fast. She said that the faster they ran, the faster the ball of light moved. My aunt said that they finally got to where their home was and ran inside and locked the door. According to her, everyone was terrified, and when they finally got the courage to look out the window, they saw nothing. The place I call my home is a Kentucky county comprised of old coal mining towns that, at one time, had a bustling economy. Unfortunately, coal mining died a slow and painful death, and so has my home. This saddens me greatly. It's one of the most beautiful places I've seen, nestled in the heart of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the earth, the Appalachians. I, along with my girlfriend and roommate, often hike on old trails around this county in hopes of finding interesting sights to see. We are always looking for somewhere neat to hike far out in the sticks. I had a friend of mine ask me and some of his work buddies if they knew any rural pathways out to test. One of them mentioned that his father had hiked a path ascending a mountain beside what we call the Old Lake, and that place scared him to death. The Old Lake is part of a forsaken, wild management area about 10 miles outside of town and towards state lines. At the base of Mount Mason, the government property lines only go so far, beyond that the land is privately owned by a local wealthy family and presumably abandoned as well. The man's father told him of how he once hiked along the ascending trail that follows the creek from the lake and up to the mountains past the wildlife management area boundaries, and I will refer to the trail as Lonesome Creek. The man crested a hill and prepared to briefly rest upon a flat spot. He quickly took notice of a shady campsite that had evidently been set up on the flat for some time. The site was unremarkable at first glance, nothing there but a fire pit surrounded by wooden chairs, but he could just barely see something else beyond the tree line. It looked as though someone haphazardly poked big sticks around the surrounding forest. A closer look revealed that what he was looking at were pikes, staked into the dirt and adorned with severed cat heads. The man's hair raised up as he felt something out there put eyes on him. He quickly put distance between himself and Lonesome Creek and never has so much as visited the old lake again. After hearing this story, it dawned on me that I had been told something similar years ago. This story too implied possible ritualistic activity on Mount Mason. As it goes, a mutual friend and his cousin had taken their ATVs on Lonesome Creek at night. Sometime into the ride, the pair spotted a makeshift sitting area right in the middle of a trail. It was a shabby construction with a few chairs and something like what a preacher holds on his Bible, a pulpit, a lectern, something like that. Even more frightening was a recently doused fire in front of the pulpit. Someone had just been there the day before they arrived. 2 riders killed their engines and unseated themselves, looking around the ridge with their flashlights. As the silence soaked in, they could make out faint voices beyond the trees on a steep incline near the ridge. Needless to say, they didn't bother shining their lights in a hurry and left, and probed no further. Remembering this incident was enough to have me look deeper into the harrowing mystery. The occult aspect of Appalachia has always intrigued me. Everything from folk magic to the blackest of practices pervades the history of the hill folk and their predominantly Scottish-Irish ancestors who emigrated long ago. In the spirit of curiosity, my girlfriend and I took a midday ride up to the backside of the old lake, opposite from the frequented dockside where the families and boats and fishes are. The road was rough in shape, and upon arrival it was obvious from the massive amount of trash that the Department of Fish and Wildlife had long since abandoned this area. We walked up the seemingly well-traveled path against the downward stream of the creek, and after reaching the marked end, we decided it was wise to go no further. The sheer seclusion of the place pulled me in, but I needed to take time to plan carefully and gather up a few willing folk to walk along the old Lonesome Creek trail. A quick check of Google Maps confirmed the garbage-ridden lakeside to indeed be the bottom of the trail. The path appeared to follow the creek up to a massive rocky ridge that wrapped around the side of Mount Mason, leading to the overview near the newer lake a few miles over. Finding out where to go was simple enough. I suspected that getting there would not be so easy. The following Saturday, I managed to gather and prepare 4 of my friends, with which we decided to set out to the old lake. 2 of us came with firearms, the other 2 bought knives and mace. Confident yet anxious, we left the dirty lakeside and headed up parallel to the creek. The lower part of the trail was lined with large, jutting rocks that formed caves below and continued up the mountainside. These enormous, jagged pieces seemed to have fallen long ago from the massive ridge above which topped Mount Mason like a crown. Past the caves and closer to the lower parts of the ridge, the trail aligned into a rocky old creek bed, now diverted and empty. We stopped to rest at the bottom of a switchback, now at a high enough elevation to be cradled by a lower portion of the ridge overhanging the trail's connecting elbow. After some respite under the stone's shade, we began to ascend to the top. The path soon wound away from the creek and continued to repeatedly switch back and forth up the side of a steep, seemingly green hill. Studded into the landscape were small scattered stones laid upon by long fallen trees, all covered with moss of an unbelievably ancient color. From this point on, the trail was faint but identifiable. Despite the trash at the trailhead, this high-up forest looked absolutely untouched. After mountaining the hill, we wound through thick growth made of a tree that I had never seen. Low-hanging branches of all-round profile surrounded the thick trunk, appearing to be a cross between a weeping willow and an acorn. Once atop of the hill, we checked Google Maps to see how far along we were, and to our dismay, we were pinpointed way off the trail on the map. This startled me, considering there was only one visible trail along the whole path. What was even more startling is that we ended up on a trail not listed on Google Maps. Google Maps showed we were near a rock crawling / ATV tourist attraction on the state line called Hole in the Rock, a wagon tunnel that cut through the mountain's crown near the top. However, the last and only check-in for the area was only 5 years prior. Apparently, we had found ourselves an old wagon trail stretching from our side through the tunnel and out onto the other side. The place was old for sure. Exciting was the notion of trekking through an archaic commerce road, passing over the old Native American land of Mount Mason. Interesting stuff. But sadly, nothing interesting happened. So we came back down. It was hard to dwell upon the chilling isolation felt at Lonesome Creek. The land was empty and quiet, not at all marred by frequent travel, and I'm deadly serious when I tell you this place had a very different energy than your typical nature trail. It invoked an unsettling combination of serenity and oppression. I found it to be the perfect place for the strangeness in the primordial wilderness. Yesterday I rang up a lady, whom I'd known for quite a while, Marla, who had been investigating the weird and wild for almost 20 years. She has her own sources, even helped find the identity of an old 20th century cold case victim. Conveniently enough, it just so happens that she and her family live about a mile from the old lake. I knew that if anyone could help point me to something, it would be her. This is what she told me. When Marla married and moved to the old lake road, it seemed nice enough, rural and quiet. She had her first child in '93, who would grow up to be one of my best friends. When he was barely a toddler, his grandparents often took him into the woods across the road from their house, through their family cemetery and up a long dirt path. One day, she received a call from her father, asking her to tell her father-in-law, who lived on the same property as Marla and her husband, not to take her son into the mountains that day, that he'd seen some strange folks camping there who seemed a bit suspect. Her father must have been pretty concerned because late that evening the state police showed up at the cemetery. The authorities informed Marla they had to run off some people on the mountain that appeared to be trying to set up a site to regularly meet and loiter. Before leaving the cemetery, the police she spoke to said plainly, "Between me and you, they were doing something strange up there," but he refused to say anything else. A year later, Marla got the gall to go with her husband up to where the police ran off the loitering creeps. She claimed to have found small animal bones scattered around a clearly once established site, and a concrete slab fitted into the dirt and etched with what she described as obviously evil symbology. Some years later, Marla thought it would be fun to take her son, now age 7, on a walk to the old lake to check out the creek, catch salamanders and find rocks, as they often did find along the rivers behind the property. They made their way to the lake and followed Lonesome Creek up towards the initial incline and past the marked area. Apart from the creek babble, Marla caught ear of what sounded like loud voices further into the woods. As she and her son continued up to face the second incline, it became evident that a group of people were gathered towards Mason's Crown. A loud voice echoed from above, booming and fervent, like a typical southern preacher. The voice spoke rapidly and was periodically answered by a group of voices which spoke in unison. They listened closely. The chanting began and ceased and everything fell quiet, and the silence was broken by the man's booming voice, angrily shouting in Marla's direction from high atop the ridge. She grabbed her son, and they ran all the way back down the trailhead, fearing that whoever gathered there had seen her and was warding her off. Like the others, she's never returned to Lonesome Creek. Years after, Marla recounted a time that her father and father-in-law had been part of something unexplainable when traveling the trailhead from Kentucky side of Mount Mason. They followed the path that both had walked many times before. The two men got lost, and Marla's father said that he had an anxious feeling wash over him, as if they were simply somewhere else entirely. They made it home unharmed, and in an amount of time they described as unusually short, but were never able to explain the event properly. It was later realized that they had somehow ended up on the other side of the state line of Mount Mason, way out there. This was not her only account of this phenomenon. As time passed, Marla has searched for answers, and she's found something interesting. Appalachia is closely tied with various oddities and old traditions, both good and bad, benign covens of witches yet existent within unbroken bloodlines, wannabe satanic sects composed of lunatics who gain pleasure through infliction of suffering, old secret societies once prominent but that have since died, with coal counties, prosperous towns dotted across all of rural Appalachia. There is so much to be uncovered, and there is even more that should be altogether left alone. If you think about it for a moment, this is the sort of place that is perfect for hiding things of a darker nature, an isolated mountain range with an ancient soul where you can find whatever your old secrets may be looking for. My dilemma is whether or not trying to find them is a good idea. This happened a few years ago when me and my buddies went into the woods at 9 p.m. To get to the woods, you have to cross an old road that leads you to a waterworks factory. This road separates the housing estate and the woods. Well, we were crossing this road and decided to enter through a different place that we'd never been to before. And we were only halfway down the road when something whistled at us. You may be thinking, it's probably just your mates, or something like that, but this was different. We knew it was coming from the bushes almost instantly, and legged it back towards the house. Naturally, my fight or flight impulse kicked in, and I ran, but the complete opposite direction to my buddies. They ran back the way they came. For some stupid reason, I ran straight towards the place the whistle came from, realized I was going the wrong way, and screamed when I saw a silhouette of a man in the bush, and I nearly fell over trying to run around. We all regrouped and made the ultimate collective decision to go back in, but there was nothing. No person, no second whistle, no speakers, no anything. The silhouette I saw was gone. So, we went into the trees and found an opening, like a little circle of ground among the trees. We found a small teddy bear, as if it was deliberately placed and positioned where it was, sitting on top of 2 twigs made to look like a cross, and 4 other sticks, holding the bear in place. We took pictures and left and never returned. I've since lost contact with my buddies due to me starting college and them entering their final year of high school. But I tried going there recently, but all the paths have been blocked due to recent red warnings and winds in the UK and fallen trees. Arwen ruined a beautiful forest and buried a mystery that I never got to solve. I worked in Yellowstone and got off work at 10 p.m. I had to walk back to my dorm, which is about a mile or so by the time I got to start hiking it was around 11 p.m. Normally you're not supposed to hike alone, or not necessarily at night, especially not alone at night. I like to go alone and hike at night, not only because that was the time I liked, but also because I had some weed buried at the top of the mountain. So every night after work I would hike about 2 miles up a mountain, unbury my weed, smoke a joint and hike back. I did this for around 2 months, no problem. Nothing ever happened, and I always carried bear spray and a light, as well as music to help ward off the random animal, and nothing ever happened. One night I go up to my spot. I'm smoking and I see 3 headlights coming from the direction of the trail. In my mind I thought it could be other hikers or it could be MPS officers, so I decide to turn my red headlights off, put out my joint and wait and listen. I waited about 10 minutes, which was more than enough time for those people to come directly by me on the trail. However, I never saw any lights come by me, and there were no offshoots to the trail that they could have come past me either or turn around at. Didn't really think too much of it. Just thought that it was kind of weird, and I went back to smoking my joint and didn't turn my light back on. Right as I'm getting to finish my joint, I hear what sounds like either a person or a very large animal break a stick a few feet behind me. At this point, instant fear. I'm thinking, holy crap, this is a mountain lion, or a moose, or a black bear, and this is a person that somehow got behind me and I didn't notice. So I slowly put my bear spray in my right hand and move my left hand up to the button on my headlamp. I turn my light on and turn towards the light super fast so that I can turn around with the bear spray in hand. What do I see? Absolutely nothing. No person, no animal, no anything. I move my light all around, looking at 360 around me as well, maybe 15 feet in every direction. After not seeing anything and being relatively sure that there was a creature of some sort, I decide to bury my weed, pack up and get down the mountain as fast as possible. It usually took me, 45 minutes to an hour to get down the mountain. However, that night I made it in 15 minutes and did not go back up for about 2 weeks. After I got comfortable again, I started going back up alone, but nothing spooky ever happened after. I live in Northern Ireland, where there are no bears, wolves or big cats. We do have frequent rumours of big cats being sighted and farm animals being mauled by them, but nothing has ever been caught. My dad, myself and a family friend were antler hunting on private property with free-roaming fallow deer, and we had the landowner's permission. And we had been searching the woods for around 2 or 3 hours with very little success. In the middle of an open field, we find a deer carcass that had been ripped to pieces. The fur was scattered in a similar fashion to how a cat would pluck its prey, and we got nervous. Later we wandered into a dense forest and found 2 freshly severed rabbit feet. This could be chalked up to the raptors, buzzards and birds of prey, but then we found a freshly severed deer leg. It was at the exact time that we also noticed the forest had fallen deathly silent. We chose not to wait around to see what was lurking. We bailed and never returned. I was doing video work in Central America, on this research island. I had been on this trail with one of the scientists about 5 times that loops around the island. Getting footage of animals is no problem, but one day one of our group does the loop in reverse. I fall behind a little bit because I'm shooting a really pretty spider, thinking I can catch up easily. When I try to hustle back to the group, I can't find them, and suddenly the trail starts to fork, which it never did when we went the right way round. Several more forks later, I'm super lost in the rainforest and starting seeing prohibido signs painted on the wood lining the trail. Then I start seeing animal traps and eventually see a very large, deteriorating wooden sign with biohazard painted on it. Cue roaring howler monkeys. I think it was the only time I've ever experienced genuine panic, and my body disregarded the brain. When I was around 13 or so in 1977, me and a friend were hiking in the woods behind her house. We came upon an abandoned one-story house, very small, with kitchen, bathroom, main room and bedroom. The walls looked like they were covered in both blood and dog crap. The bedroom area had wood across the bottom of the door, much as to maybe keep a dog or dogs in the room. And from the amount of crap there was in there, we figured crap was on the floor and all over the walls. There was also a suitcase in the house. We opened the suitcase and it was full of romance novels. Barbara Cartland as well as Harlequin romance. They were all in mint condition. Yes, my friend and I took the books to read them. Hell, we were hormonal teenage girls. Today the woods are gone, and a subdivision is there now. But I'm always left wondering, what the hell happened there? And why did they abandon that small house and leave behind all these romance novels? Guess I'll never know. I went hunting with my dad for the first time. He took me to his usual hunting spot, but then we found a better spot. It was this bowl like in the shape of the mountain, and there was a lot of animal activity there, so we thought it was a steal of a place. It was our second to last day and we decided to split up on this ridge that looks down on thick brush on both sides. My dad sat a few yards at the top, and I sat towards the middle/bottom. Anyway, we'd been there about half an hour, and then I heard a rifle get shot, and a howl like a bear came after. I sat there, and my dad came down and we listened to the bear make its way to our area. We then heard it roar and began fighting something else that had a way deeper howl. It was super loud and so intense. We hear the bear yip and tear down trees. We could hear the feet hit the ground and the thuds of whatever was hitting the bear hit the ground floor. It went on for 20 minutes, and then we heard the bear give out a final howl, and the thuds slowly went away. We sat there for 20 minutes before we went for the fire trail at the bottom of the ridge. Its hooves or feet were loud and tense and heading towards us, so we ran to the fire trail at the bottom and waited. We heard the thing stop, and we were just on the ridge. The deep breaths this thing took, it made a gruffing sound, like it was smelling or trying to cough, just hovered in the air before walking off. We didn't see anything, as there was brush blocking where we were, but we waited 10 minutes and headed to the area we believed the fight happened. The whole area was destroyed. It looked like a plane had crashed there. We didn't see a carcass, but we did hear a final howl. It was deep and loud, and came from the thing that walked through our spot of the ridge. It sounded like it was on the mountain behind us now. Since then, we haven't had any encounters like that, but I won't forget it. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe a moose, but it was frickin' scary. A group of friends and myself decided to go hiking in some woods about 2 miles from our house. When we reached the mouth of the woods, everything felt fine and normal, so we continued going. Once we were inside, we hiked for about a mile before we stumbled upon this run-down building. I could sense the aura coming from it. It was definitely dark, and I didn't want to have any part of it. It was at that point I told my friends to turn around, but at that same moment we heard a blood-curdling scream. That's when we see 2 figures emerge. One of them was at least 6 feet tall and walked on all fours, and the other was human-like but had long, spindly arms that appeared like they could wrap around me twice over. Upon seeing them, we ran faster than our life depended on it. It felt like my heart was going to give out, and we didn't stop running until we got out of the woods. I wonder what the hell those things were, and if anyone could provide any clarity or answers, I'm all ears. I was smoking with my friend in the forest. We were only 200 meters away from the street and 50 meters away from the last real path when we sat on some benches in the woods and blazed. The paths through the woods are completely dark and you can't see anything without a flashlight. Then all of a sudden a dude in a suit and suitcase came out of nowhere, not where the actual path should be, but just behind us, straight out of the forest. It was crazy. No light, nothing. Just walking through the woods. It creeped the hell out of us, and we still can't fathom what the hell this guy was doing there. I was 10 years old and exploring the woods behind our school with 3 of my friends. We wanted to find the perfect spot to build a treehouse that wouldn't be easily found. Turns out, a guy had a very similar idea when he chose this exact spot to hang himself, and it scarred me for the longest time, as you could probably imagine. Finding a dead body at 10 is not something I would recommend. One night, a few friends and I went on a hike in the woods to smoke some weed. Well, we all went to our usual hangout spot, Sunshine Grove, which is a small flat clearing with a close proximity to a high school nearby, a common place for kids to go and drink or smoke. It was around 10 or 11, and as we entered the grove, myself and 4 friends, we saw 2 men camping out there. They had a campfire, a tent, and a bottle of wild turkey. We said hello and went on our way to a small wood fort around 60 feet from the clearing to smoke and chill. We finished our business, got super high, and then decided to head back to the car, which was parked about a 20-minute walk up the hill where the trail begins. I should mention now that one of my friends has mental health issues and is very spacey and odd, especially when he gets high. Where he is, he'd get very silent and out of it. Needless to say, this guy probably shouldn't have been getting high with us. Anyway, as we exited the clearing, we said goodbye to the camping guys, who at this point were absolutely wasted as they drunk the majority of the bottle. We walked through the darkness and hiked up the hilly terrain, joking around when I noticed that my friend wasn't with the group. I'm used to him not talking so much, so I hadn't even noticed until we were about halfway to the car. When I called him and got his voicemail, I became a bit concerned, so we all turned back to look for him. I re-entered Sunshine Grove to look for him, and because the entrance is kind of annoying to traverse, I went by myself while my friends chilled and waited for me nearby. When I turned the corner and entered the clearing, I saw both the drunk guys surround my friend, groping him and appearing to try and undress him. My friend was frozen stiff. It seemed like he was in a trance. He snapped out of it as I ripped him away by his arms and started screaming at the sickos. They backed off, and we both ran in the opposite direction towards the rest of our friends. Within the hour, we assembled a larger group and went looking for them, but when we returned to Sunshine Grove, the camp was gone, and I never saw them again. I've seen other weird stuff out there, like small neo-Nazi gatherings and abandoned weed-growing operations, and a full-on mountain lion corpse. There's also a rusted car out there from the 40s crashed in a ravine, as well as a 40-foot rope swing. We had a lot of fun out there as a teen, and got poison oaked more times than I care to remember. This happened in Russia. Despite the fact I'm very much a city person, I spent every summer in the village. We had a small gazebo in the woods on the riverbank. It was almost midnight and completely dark. While we were chatting and playing cards, I noticed a flash as if from a camera and asked if anyone else had seen it. Everyone said they hadn't, and we gave up on it. Then the flash was repeated, but on the other side of the river from the forest, and this one was noticed by one of the guys. Then the flashes were more and more frequent, and the locations of the flashes were always changing. We joked that some sick jerks were filming us on a camera, but soon another flash happened to the campfire, which was literally 2 meters away from me. I remember when it happened, I saw how the sand rose up from the flash and extinguished the fire. We sat in deathly silence for a while. There was no chirping of birds, no crickets. It seemed that even the current of river was muffled. "We have to go," I said, and we went. The girls were walking in front and we were behind, and from time to time we looked back. At some point, one of the friends shouted, "Run." I turned around and saw the outline of a furry something, tall and wide. I thought it was covered in black fur, and he also said it had red dots that appeared like laser pointers. When we ran away, we began to share what we saw. The details matched. Of course, the adults didn't believe us. However, after a few weeks, the guy and his girlfriend returned from that place and approached us. The girl was crying and the guy was pale. They said they saw it too. It's also funny that I remember how a local drunk said he went hunting for the chupacabra at night. He said he saw two red eyes looking at him from the forest at night, so he decided to take a gun and look for something. That was before our encounter. At the time, I thought it was the light from a radio tower that was reflected somehow. However, remembering now, I think maybe he was right. I wish I could ask him, but he shot himself. It's unlikely that this thing is what he saw in the forest. He wanted to do it before he owned someone. It is unlikely that this is what he saw in the forest. He just wanted to do it before he owed someone. That's the way things are out here. My boyfriend and I had been dating for almost a month at this point, back in 2020. It was late October, almost Halloween, and I wanted to do some fun nighttime nature walking. And my aunt told me about this cool, unknown grave off of Lake Erie in a nature park. We went there and got super lost, and neither of us had reception, so we had a lot of fun. We stayed on the trail so we weren't lost, and we could just get back to the parking lot. But just lost enough to be the kind of creepy fun kind that we were looking for. We finally found the grave, got a lot of pictures and videos, and took a short break and saw that the lake was less than 10 yards from us. But we were at the top of a cliff, so we decided to follow the trails further out along the lake until we found a trail spot that took us to a little secluded beach. It was around 9 p.m, but it was October, so it was already really dark out, and it was partially cloudy, but the slight amount of stars lit up the lake in a way that was so beautiful. So we sat on a log and just looked out while chatting a bit. After about 15 minutes of just sitting, looking and relaxing, we both see this flash of light that came from behind us. I should tell you that unlike most stories like this, there was no alcohol or drugs involved. But we both see this flash and instantly freeze, look at each other and ask if we both saw it. We turned on the flashlights and turned around to see where it came from. It looked like a really bright camera flash, but there was no one out there, and we hadn't seen or heard anyone else out there the entire time we were there, and it had been about 2 hours. We even checked around for trail cams in the area and couldn't find anything. So we both grabbed large sticks from the beach and started walking down the trail to try and get back to the car. We didn't take the same trail back, which is kind of lucky judgment on our part, because the one we took was way faster than the one we took to get there. But the whole way back, we kept seeing eyes in the woods around us. There were just deer, coyotes, and other animals inhabiting the area, but it still freaked us out and kept us on our toes. We made it back to the car safely and went home. But we came back during the daytime a few days later to look around for trail cams that we may have missed because of how dark it was. We didn't find anything, and still have no idea what that flash was. I don't wish to knock my mum at all, but she used to be into drugs, and we lived in rural Indiana, so she would sleep and at times wouldn't even wake up so we could go to school. One morning we went out in the woods. We had everything out there, to the point where we would get in trouble, as we would take all of the toilet paper out there and not have any in the house. Well, one time our mum was asleep, and we were out there early. We hiked a long way and I sat down on a dead log and a mosquito landed on me. It bit me and the ground started vibrating. I felt like I was being in the utility room next to a washing machine, and I assumed it was a West Nile because I didn't know anything about the disease. In my childhood mind, you get bit and the symptoms settle in immediately. When we went home, my mum demanded to know where we were. Things had started falling off the shelves. It had been an earthquake. We live on a major fault line, but didn't know it at the time. We had a bunch of tornadoes, but I never imagined we'd had earthquakes. I just thought it was West Nile. Anyway, I'm so glad that it finished quickly. Hey guys, it's Mort here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's video. Happy Friday, everyone. Of course, don't forget that you can download the Mort's Bedtime Stories app for even more scary stories. We literally just pushed an update, so it's probably there now, for even more stories and improved audio and lots of cool stuff. So yeah, check it out. It is free. Just download it. It's really cool. What else? Huge thanks, as always, to my members and patrons. I love you guys. You're the best. And merch. Yes, we have merch. Look, you can check out the merch store if you want to get it, I suppose. Maybe we should do a Black Friday sale. Get some discount codes sent out. Would you guys like that? Let me know. I'm going to wrap things up here, though. Stay awesome. Stay safe in the woods. I'll see you in the next one.